Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us this evening for another one of our Discover evenings. For those of you that don't know, my name is Helen Bryan, and I am a wildlife consultant at Wildlife Worldwide and the Travelling Naturalist, and I'm also a tour leader. And next year, I'm going to have the great pleasure of taking a group out to the Galapagos on a pretty much identical itinerary to my big boss, the big cheese. Mr. Christopher Breen is in the building. Hello.
You're terrible.
I know, professional to the core.
No.
But yes, I'm going to
introduce... I'm going to have a drink.
I'm going to say this is Chris Breen, for those of you that are unaware, if you've been living under a rock for the last 30 years. And he leads a trip out to the Galapagos in May next year. And we are working on one for the following year as well, with a renowned naturalist, conservationist, photographer, and whale expert, Mark Cowadine. So I'm going to hand over to Chris. You don't need to speak to me particularly, other than just to say if you wish to send any messages and ask any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A session and or the chat that you can see along your screen as an option. But I'm going to hand over to Mr. Chris Breen. Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you very much. Oh dear. Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much, Helen. So I'm lucky enough to have been to the Galapagos now on a number of occasions, 4 or 5 times. Last year, I was in the Galapagos for a month with my pal and co-tour leader, Mark Cowadine. The Galapagos is just fabulous. It is a really fabulous place, and I love it. It's the most wonderful place to visit. It's a place where the wildlife just isn't afraid of us at all. So I'm going to take you off on a journey to the incredible Galapagos Islands. We've been offering trips to the Galapagos for many years now. In fact, almost since we started Wildlife Worldwide, which was now 31 years ago. But I think we've been offering trips to the Galapagos certainly for 25 or 26 years. And the very first vessel that we offered trips to the Galapagos was a vessel called the Beluga. And that's the trip that I lead trips on. That's the vessel, sorry, that I lead trips on with Mark, and that Helen will be on board next year as well on her own trip. So I thought I would begin perhaps in a logical place, which was looking at where the Galapagos are, and where the Galapagos Islands are, where the Galapagos archipelago is. Forgive me if many of you know where the Galapagos is, but it seems a logical place to begin. So they are about 900 miles west of their host country of Ecuador. Sorry, yeah, 900 kilometers, I beg your pardon there, 900 kilometers west of Ecuador. They're out in the Pacific, as you can see. So in order to get to the Galapagos, what we do is we go via Quito in Ecuador, which is it's a beautiful, busy, it's an attractive city. It's high in the Andes at about, sits at just under 10,000 feet, about 9,500 feet. And my recommendation would certainly be to spend a night or two there if you can. The very first night of our trip is in actual fact in Quito. There's lots of big hotels in Quito, as you can imagine, being a capital city, but there's also some lovely small hotels, and we make use of a little place called Casona de la Ronda, which is a lovely little hotel, and this is the inside of the hotel. But I'd certainly recommend spending an extra night or two there if you have the time. You'll see this map a few times during the course of our presentation. It's quite useful for me to be able to refer back to it, and so I will do that. I thought, though, again, it was worth just mentioning some of the Galapagos Islands famous history, much of which, of course, is known in respect of Charles Darwin. The very first time it was recorded, or the first recorded visit, I should say, was actually in 1535, when the Bishop of Panama was sailing to Peru, and he was blown off course, and he accidentally ended up in the Galapagos Islands. And in 1684, it was the very first map of the Galapagos that was made. But of course, the most famous visitor and the person who is probably in most people's eyes most associated with the Galapagos, of course, is Charles Darwin, who arrived here in 1835, and he disembarked the Beagle on the southwestern corner of San Cristobal. And I have to say, he wasn't especially positive about his initial experience. I have been rather more positive about my experiences, but I shall read you a short piece, which was how he described his first arrival. He says, "It was black lava, completely covered by small leafless brushwood and low trees. The fragments of lava were most porous are reddish like cinders. The stunted trees show little sign of life. The plants smell unpleasantly. The black rocks on the beach are frequented by large and most disgusting clumsy lizards, and the country is compared to what we might imagine the cultivated parts of the infernal region would appear." So for him, it wasn't an especially positive experience. For us, let's hope it is a more positive experience. Like I said, we fly into Quito. The flights go from Quito down to Guayaquil and then across to the Galapagos, where there are two main airports, one which is here on San Cristobal, and the other which is on just to the north of Santa Cruz. When we arrive into the Galapagos, what we do, of course, in our case, on the trips that we're leading, respectively, myself and Helen, is head as quickly as we can from the airport to our beautiful boat. And this is our beautiful boat. It's a boat called Beluga, as I mentioned earlier. It really is the loveliest boat you could possibly imagine. It is a motor cruiser that accommodates 16 people. Which is a lovely number. It has a nice salon bar area inside. It has nice, comfortable table and chairs for and dining facilities generally. It's a really super vessel. It has a nice library. It really has a super crew, and it's absolutely perfect for everything that we need. And this is another shot of Beluga. I just thought I would point out, you can see that there's some kayaks on top of the boat, and also you can see what we would, I guess, in expedition terms, refer to as a zodiac on hanging off the port side there, on the side that's closest to us. There's also lovely viewing decks. There's a lovely viewing deck at the top. You should be able to see my mouse with any luck, but this is a lovely outdoor viewing deck, sun deck, which is really super. We can also go down onto the bow, and on this area here, near the bow, in front of where the captain's area is, and it's great for looking for seabirds, for photography, for looking out for whales and so on. And we'll touch on all of these things during the course of our chat this evening. So on our voyage, on our first day, we board Beluga shortly after we have landed, and we are boarding in San Cristobal here. And what we then do is we head out to Beluga for lunch, and then after we've had lunch on Beluga, we head back onto the island, and we go up into the highlands of San Cristobal. We go into the highlands. It's our first afternoon. We're probably still getting over jet lag a bit, but kind of finding our feet, and it's really nice to get out in the fresh air, stretch our legs, have a bit of a walk. It's not always possible to have particularly good viewing from here, purely and simply because of the mist, which you saw on the last image. And the mist can come down at this time of year. We'll be there in May and June. And the mist can come down. It's still lovely to get out and about. There's still lots of lovely things to see, and the walking is absolutely super. And once you've walked up here, I'm just going to jump back one. There is actually a lovely lagoon you can see, but that depends on the mist level. The walking is nice and easy. We'll sort of start looking at the birds. This is one of the warbler finches. This is a grey warbler finch that's endemic to San Cristobal. And the next image is of Galapagos yellow warbler, which is near endemic to the Galapagos Islands. And none of these things, as of course you know, but none of these things are even slightly deterred by our presence. So we'll spend the afternoon up in the highlands, having a look around, having a look at some birds, stretching our legs, getting to know the area a little bit. And as the day draws to a close, we will head back down into the town, which is where the port is. It's a place called Puerto Bacarrizo Moreno, and this is on the southwestern tip of San Cristobal, very close to where Charles Darwin first landed in 1835. We'll have an hour or so to explore the town. It's a pretty place. It's not a big town. It has a population of about 7,000 people. There's one or two nice coffee shops and so on. We'll have an opportunity to perhaps grab a beer or something before we then head back out to our boat, head back out to Beluga, which is going to be our home for the next couple of weeks. So overnight, what we'll be doing is we will be sailing from port here in San Cristobal down to the island of Espanola in the southeastern corner of the Galapagos archipelago. And we will be aiming for a place called Gardner Bay. It's the first of our beach landings. We'll spend the morning here. We'll have plenty of time for photography. We've got plenty of time to, if you like, spread out on the beach. It's one of the places where we're actually not quite so restricted as to where we can go, how far we can walk and so on. But it's lovely just spending time walking up and down the beach and starting to get to know the creatures and the animals that we'll see. This is Espanola mockingbird, and it has absolutely no fear. It could well be sitting on the lens of your camera, or standing on your bag, or standing on your feet. Another of the local endemics. This is Espanola lava lizard and Espanola ground finch, and we will see many of these during the course of our trip. This is Sally Lightfoot. This is a Sally Lightfoot crab. These beautiful, colourful crabs. And we'll also have we'll see plenty of Espanola marine iguanas, which is probably the most beautiful and brightly coloured of all the marine iguanas. And the beach is littered with them. And we'll have plenty of opportunity to set up our cameras, lie down on the sand, sit on a rock and just watch them and see what they do. It's a lovely experience. It's a lovely beach. It's a beach with almost nobody on it. And it's a great place to spend our first excursion. Returning back to Beluga for lunch, following lunch, we'll then go out on another excursion. And this will also be on Espanola. This will be on the other side of Espanola, which is the most fantastic and fabulous walk that we'll be making. And I need to point out a couple of things in this photograph, which I'm sure you can see, but this is a very typical Galapagos scene. So we've got a Galapagos sea lion here. Hopefully you can see that. That's sort of the principal thing in my my image here. Excuse me. There's also marine iguanas. If you look closely, there's marine iguanas all over the place. And then in the background, there's Nazca boobies, again, all over the place. It's a typical Galapagos scene, and one that's repeated in numerous places. The Nazca boobies should be nesting at the time that we're there. We may well see nesting Galapagos oyster catchers whilst we're there. This is another of the endemics of the Galapagos. And there's a very good chance, in fact, it would be very unusual if we weren't to see these, but we'll see waved albatross. In fact, the only time that waved albatross aren't here is January, February, and March. So unless there's some catastrophic climatic event, then the waved albatross will be present when we are running the trips that myself and Mark are running, and that Helen is running. They nest exclusively on Espanola. So this, albeit that this is in the first couple of days of our trip, this is one of the real highlights of our holiday. They're all highlights. Everywhere we go is a highlight, but seeing the waved albatrosses is a real highlight. And I think especially if you've been fortunate enough to see albatrosses in other places, you know, adding another albatross to the list is something worth doing, something worth having. So there'll be lots of young that are screaming for their meals. There'll be lots of albatrosses flying around as well, which is wonderful. And like many other places in the Galapagos, this is an excellent place to see, guess what? Blue-footed boobies. I wonder why they're called that. And again, it is possible to get impossibly close to them. In fact, you'll be quite literally stepping over the top of them in order to get past. And we do actually have to be very careful, especially when they have eggs, as this one does. Egg or eggs. Sometimes they have two, but generally speaking, it's only one. The other endemic, another of the things that those of you who know me and know that I have a keen interest in the avian side of things, but I particularly like raptors, and Galapagos hawk is a real corker. And again, you can get so close to these animals without them being even slightly concerned. From here, we then move on. And we move to another island. Hopefully you can see my my mouse here. We move on to Floriana. And in Floriana, again, we'll see blue-footed boobies, and we may well see them beginning their mating rituals, which is quite nice when we're there, which again, as I say, is May, June. This is another of the yellow warblers, Galapagos yellow warbler. This one's a bit more chirpy than the other one we saw. And also on Floriana, we stand a very good chance of seeing Galapagos flamingo. So when I was here last year, on both occasions that I was on Floriana, we had reasonably large numbers, 20 to 30 Galapagos flamingos. Which again, of course, needless to say, are beautiful. Depending on light levels, photographic opportunities can be either good, because they're always good, or they can be outstanding. And some lovely butterflies and things around as well. So we're going to move on because we have a number of islands to look at, a number of islands to visit. And we're going to move on. This time we are now heading for Santa Cruz. So Santa Cruz is the most populous of the islands in terms of human population. And during the course of our voyage, we visit Santa Cruz on a number of different occasions. And I will actually show right at the end of our presentation this evening, I'll show you a map of the voyage that we're doing, and you'll see that we actually visit Santa Cruz on a number of different occasions during the course of the voyage. But rather than going back to it on a number of occasions for the purposes of this presentation, I'll talk to you about Santa Cruz all in one go. So one of the first places that we visit on Santa Cruz is a place called Dragon Hill. And Dragon Hill isn't renowned for these guys, the lava lizards, though there are lava lizards in many places. Dragon Hill isn't renowned for photographers either, but there are wonderful photographic opportunities. But it is renowned for lava lizards, and this is a Santa Cruz lava lizard. And it's also renowned for these guys, which is the Galapagos land iguana. So of the iguanas that we'll see different species on different islands, but we'll see two key groups of iguanas. We'll see land iguanas and we'll see marine iguanas. This is one of the many land iguanas that we'll see, as is this. What we'll also see on Santa Cruz when we go up into the highlands is tortoises. This will be the place where we see the first of the giant tortoises. And the giant tortoises are amazing for all the reasons that you might imagine, at least one of which is that they really are absolutely gigantic. They're, of course, relatively slow-moving creatures. And we go to I wouldn't describe it as a farm. We go to a highland area, which is a privately owned area in the highlands, where the conditions are just right for tortoises. And so there are always many tortoises on this land, and the opportunities to photograph them again are many and various, and we will spend 2 or 3 hours here looking at the tortoises because they are just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And again, you know, you'll hear me saying it during the course of the presentation many times, I'm sure, but the photographic opportunities here are exceptional. Nearby, there is also a cave that, if the conditions are right, we'll have an opportunity to visit, and we'll be able to see another of the Galapagos endemics, which you've all guessed, of course, that this is in fact a Galapagos barn owl. Galapagos barn owls are found throughout the Galapagos Islands, but I think it's one of those species because although it's found throughout the islands, it's not populous. The population isn't high. So it's one of the species you need to know where they are. You'll see this one has a band on its leg or a ring. So I imagine they probably all do. But we knew where this one was. This is a known site, and we were able to actually go into this cave very quietly where we knew that the barn owl lived, and get some wonderful photos of it. The other thing that we'll do when we are in Santa Cruz is we'll go to the Charles Darwin Foundation. And the Charles Darwin Foundation is actually where Lonesome George lives, although he's actually no longer alive, where you'll find Lonesome George, I should say, and lots of information about him and a memorial to him. But it's a place where we'll see various of the different tortoise species. There are a number of different species of tortoise, of course, as I'm sure you know. They are identifiable by their different shell types. So, for example, if you look at this shell here, you can see it's sort of a nice smooth shell. So this would identify it's come from one particular island. These ones that have much squarer shells, as these 1, 2, 3 have, and possibly this chap over here, I'm not quite sure, will identify it's come from a different island. And there are breeding programs here. We'll learn about breeding programs. We'll learn about how they are being conserved now and into the future. And it's fascinating. And the Charles Darwin Research Centre is a really great couple of hours. It's a great experience and a great place to visit. Once we've finished at the Charles Darwin Research Centre, we'll then have an opportunity to go into Puerto Ayora, which is the main town on Santa Cruz. We'll have an opportunity to have a wander around, to perhaps visit 1 or 2 shops, to visit the local market. This is a market that I particularly like. I like this fish market, partly because I like this sort of rather nice local scene with the ladies at the fish market, with the fish on the counter, and the boats in the background. But of course, more particularly because I rather like the pelicans that are sat there waiting and hoping that there may be some scraps coming. It looks like quite a harmonious relationship. Puerto Ayora is a fairly big place, however, and is home to about 12,000 people. It's certainly the largest of all of the towns in the Galapagos. And if you were doing another voyage, perhaps not the voyage that myself or Helen are leading, this may well be where you would board your vessel. You may well board your vessel here in Puerto Ayora and then head off and sail from here to elsewhere. So we're going to continue on our journey, and now we are going to head up here into the northeastern corner to the island of Genovesa. So that's a long overnight trip on our boat Beluga. And I thought I would just kind of mention that the overnight trips are, I mean, a lot of the sailing in inverted commas is done overnight in order that we don't waste daylight and daytime, of course. But even when we're sailing during the day, there's always plenty to see. There is really no wasted time at all, because we'll be spending time out on deck. And out on deck, we will have plenty of photographic opportunities. We'll have plenty of opportunities to see birds like this male magnificent frigate bird is quite likely to be following us for extended periods during the course of the day. And from Beluga, we have this lovely stable platform from which to photograph, and it's quite nice lying down on the back deck and looking up at these guys. So this is a male magnificent frigate bird. This is a female magnificent frigate bird, but it's quite nice lying down on the deck at the back on some of the cushions and looking up and photographing the things that there are whizzing around us and coming over the top, including also things like this rather beautiful red-billed tropic bird, which is nesting on some of the islands too, and may well be nesting when we're there. So that's one of the reasons why I say that there is no such thing as wasted time. There's also whale watching opportunities too, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So we're aiming for that island in the northeastern corner, which is an island called Genovesa. And on Genovesa, we'll be landing at a place called Darwin Bay. These red-billed tropic birds are actually nesting at Darwin Bay, amongst other places, but they are nesting at Darwin Bay. And there's also a huge colony of nesting great frigate birds. This is a young great frigate bird. And again, we have wonderful opportunities to get nice and close, to see them close up without disturbing them, and enjoying the range of colors. I find this range of colors very interesting. To me, the bill and the eye-ring and so on are really very slight sort of powdery blue, you know, these are big birds, and the colors are beautiful, matched with that lovely rusty tan color. And when they're all grown up, fully adult males, and when they're in breeding dress, if you like, they puff out these pouches, this beautiful red pouch, and that really is a sight to be seen. And they'll be doing this when we're there, or with any luck, they'll be doing this when we're there. I also particularly like this lovely cape that they wear. And if you can see this lovely cape of almost an oily green color, the feathers. I think it's just magnificent. I love it. This is also a place where we'll have some wonderful opportunities to see red-footed boobies, not blue-footed boobies in this case, but red-footed boobies. Some of the red-footed boobies are, I think about 10% of the population of the red-footed boobies come in this rather magnificent white color phase. They are certainly by no means all that color. The vast majority of them are this color, but that white I think is rather special, but they're all special. And guess who this belongs to? Red-footed booby. There's a surprise. Other things that we might see here include these rather beautiful swallow-tailed gulls. This, I suspect, is a male preening or attempting to preen or trying to woo a female. And it's an excellent place to see swallow-tailed gulls because they quite literally are breeding here year-round. Other things that we're highly likely to see here include Genovesa cactus finch, doing what all good Genovesa cactus finches in Genovesa do, which is sit on a cactus. I guess maybe that's why it's called a Genovesa cactus finch. And also we will see another of the mockingbirds. Guess what this one's called? Genovesa mockingbird. And it is quite different in appearance to the mockingbirds that we saw earlier and that we would have seen earlier in the trip. Habits are very similar, but certainly visual appearance is different and the coloration is different. This particular one's much paler. Also, we may well see this guy. This is another of the finches. This is large ground finch. And it is a big bird with a bill that is really takes up about half the size of its head. It is absolutely huge. And again, all these things nice and close by, and great for photography. It's yet another place where we'll see blue-footed boobies, this particular island, Genovesa. But this photograph of a blue-footed booby was taken in the afternoon, and it was taken on the other side of Darwin Bay in a place called Prince Philip's Steps, named after the one and only Prince Philip, who visited many years ago. If you would imagine the steps to be nice and relatively shallow, not steep, and quite stable, then you would be wrong. In this particular case, they are a little bit rickety, but they're perfectly easily accessible, and they are quite steep. But a trip up, a walk up, which only takes a couple of minutes, gets us to some wonderful wildlife viewing opportunities. And there's another big colony of blue-footed boobies that is nesting here. Of course, many Galapagos sea lions, because they are quite, well, almost everywhere. And every pup seems to be even more photogenic than the previous pup. And there are also some lovely opportunities here, although I'm not going to illustrate it with a photograph, of seeing Galapagos fur seal. This would be the first place where we may well see Galapagos fur seals. One of the reasons why I really like this spot, why I think it's really special, is that we do the most beautiful walk through the nesting boobies and other birds, frigate birds, and gulls and one or two other things, but to this canyon. And actually you can't really tell that it's a canyon until you get much closer to it, as we are here on this photograph. And when you get closer to the canyon, you better do a bit of looking, a bit of hunting. Obviously you can see the cactus in the foreground there. And if you get your eye in, and if you're lucky, you may well see one of these, which is a Galapagos short-eared owl. And I have to say, I think he's lovely. They are absolutely gorgeous. The Galapagos short-eared owl is one of the most beautiful of all the owls, and I'm lucky enough to have seen lots of owls. But anyway, I really rather like the Galapagos short-eared owl. And although you find them in various places, this particular location, nothing is ever certain, is it? It's the wildlife world we're talking about here. But this particular location is, well, offers us a very good opportunity to see them, I should say. If we were to come, well, what we are doing, where we are now, we're up in the northeastern corner of the archipelago. And we need to get down and across to the western side, to Isabela. So in actual fact, what we do is we go through the center of the islands. And I'm not going to show you this on a map, but if you can just imagine the center of the islands, but we go through then two places, one of which is called Sombrero Chino, Sombrero Chino, which means Chinese hat, to look at, to have some more rather wonderful snorkeling, and I will touch on that again a little bit later, but to see some more marine iguanas, which are a different size and a different shape. So another species of marine iguana. Sombrero Chino, I should say, lies just below the largish island of Santiago. We see marine iguanas doing peculiar things like sticking their feet in the air, their legs in the air like this. And as I say, these marine iguanas are considerably smaller than any of the other marine iguanas we would have seen previously. Again, we will also see many Sally Lightfoot crabs, hundreds, if not thousands of them. And at the time of year that we're going, the walking here is absolutely beautiful. They're lovely, lovely colors of the succulents. This almost autumnal colors, actually, but the colors are really dramatic and very, very spectacular. So from here, what we do is we continue on. So where we were on the last set of slides was in this general area. What we're going to do now is we're going to head on in a southwesterly direction, because this island of Isabela and the island of Fernandina are incredibly important to us. So Isabela, as is pretty obvious from the map here, is the biggest of all of the islands. And again, from the point of view of the way that the itinerary works, we do a little bit of jumping backwards and forwards. However, we will visit during the course of our trip Puerto Villamil, we'll visit Punta Moreno, we'll go to Elizabeth Bay, we'll go to Targus Cove, and we will also go to Fernandina. So the next set of images basically is a kind of a clockwise direction route around Isabela. Beginning with a stop in a little town called Puerto Villamil, And from Puerto Villamil, we do a hike. So we drive from Puerto Villamil up to the edge of one of the national parks, from where we then walk. And we walk up to this incredible caldera at a place called Sierra Negra. The walk is 45 minutes to an hour. It's not difficult. When Mark and I were there last year, we did this twice, of course, because we were with two different groups. The first time we went there, we had this beautiful view. The second time we went, it was misty and you couldn't see the base of the caldera. But they were both very different experiences, both very wonderful. But it's not always visible like this, but the hike is tremendous. And one of the things that we look for when we're doing the hike is this rather lovely little vermilion flycatcher. And as so I should say, we'll spend the morning there, we'll come back, then we'll spend the afternoon in Puerto Villamil. There's actually a very nice beach where we'll have an opportunity to have a swim. Again, we can have a little bit of a look around. We will go to a small research center where they're doing research on the giant tortoises that are on Isabela. And then we'll have an opportunity to go and perhaps grab a beer or something at a quick drink or a coffee or whatever it might be in Puerto Villamil town before we then go back out to Beluga and head on round in as I say, generally in a clockwise direction. The next place we go to will be a place called Punta Moreno. Punta Moreno is one of many, or perhaps they all are, beautiful and interesting places in the Galapagos. And here we'll have an opportunity to go out in the zodiacs and look at various different things. This is a common tern, which curiously, despite its name, is actually uncommon in the Galapagos Islands. So it's rather lovely to see it. And we may well also, at the time of year that we're there, we may well also see courtship behavior from the flightless cormorants and possibly nesting, as this one was doing, nesting behavior. And then we head further north, and further north we will go to a place called Urbina Bay. And if you can recall the map of Isabela, you may recall that it's a rather sort of elongated shape with a left facing foot at the bottom. In that little sort of in the corner, a little bit north of the corner, is a place called Urbina Bay. And in Urbina Bay, we may well see more tortoises again on our hike, on our day trip. But we will also, and most definitely, see more land iguanas, more opportunities of seeing land iguanas. And we may well see courtship behavior, we may well see fighting, we may well see other activity than quite simply this. But if they're doing this, then they will allow us to get nice and close. We'll also invariably find more birds, such as this medium ground finch. And I have to say, the finches are tough. There's a number of different species of the finches, and they are all very slightly different. Some of them are more obviously different than others, if that doesn't sound double Dutch, but they're not the easiest birds to work out, which actually, from a personal point of view, is one of the things that makes them interesting. Now, I mentioned Fernandina, which is the island to the west of Isabela, large island to the west of Isabela. Fernandina is another of the many very special places. And this is Galapagos hawk, which we are highly likely to see on Fernandina. And Galapagos hawk, which is actually a buzzard, it's a type of buzzard, it's Buteo, so it's a similar genus to our buzzards over here. but this is a great place to see buzzards. It's also a great place to keep your eyes open for snakes. And we had some fantastic sightings of the Western Galapagos racer. And I've got oodles of photographs of them. You'll be pleased to hear that I'm only going to show you two. But we had fantastic sightings of Western Galapagos racer. Of course, we also had fantastic sightings of the many, many, many thousands of marine iguanas, for which Fernandina is quite rightly famous. Many thousands. Why has he only got a photograph of one, I hear you ask? Which is fair enough. So here's a photograph of a few more. Almost impossible to photograph them because there's so many of them. But this is a photograph of a lava lizard sitting on an iguana's head and living a rather harmonious life, I would say. So after we've been around the western side of Isabela and we've gone all the way over the top of Isabela, we then sail once again through the center of the archipelago. And before our trip ends, we visit another couple of sites, one of which is a place called Sullivan Bay, and the other is Pinnacle Rock. And I'm just going to point out to you with my mouse here, the lighthouse at the top on Pinnacle Rock. And we'll go back to that. You won't actually be able to see the lighthouse, but that is a point from which there is an iconic view. In fact, the iconic view. Sullivan Bay is brilliant. Sullivan Bay is, all of the islands are volcanic, but on Sullivan Bay, there's a particular type of lava, this lava, which is called rope lava, which was laid down only about 200 years ago. But it's incredible. It looks as though it's still fresh. It looks as though it's still wet. It looks as though it's still hot. But it is warmed by the sun, and it's incredibly kind of tactile in a way, and it's incredibly relaxing to just lie down on the rock and soak up the afternoon sun. And everywhere, every now and again, there's some interesting little bits of life that you'll find. On the other side of this bay, I mentioned and showed you the lighthouse, and I mentioned Pinnacle Rock, and that is on an island called Bartolome. And that's the last, well, actually, it's not quite the last, it's the penultimate of the islands that we visit on our voyage. You'll see the landing point here, indicating it with my mouse. And in actual fact, you can see that there is a Galapagos sea lion on there. When we landed there, on both occasions that I've landed there, it's taken some time to encourage the Galapagos sea lions back into the water in order that we don't have a more exciting landing than we need to have. But the climb up to the viewpoint is, it can be slow going. It's not difficult because there are steps, and the steps are all beautifully made, and it's all rather lovely, and there's lots of places to stop along the way. And when you get to the top, this is the view that you have. It's the iconic view of the Galapagos Islands, with a whole series of islands in the background, and of course the pinnacle, which you can see on the right-hand side. You can see there, and it's a lovely place to go snorkeling. And again, as I say, we'll touch on that in just a moment. So what I hope I've managed to do is to give you a bit of a flavour of what the islands are like. And I've gone through various different islands, and I've kind of shown you some of the wildlife you'll see on the various different islands. And I could genuinely talk for hours and hours and hours about the Galapagos. It's one of the most fantastic places I've ever been. As I say, I've been 4 or 5 times already. I'm really excited about going back next year and in 2025. Helen mentioned we're in the process of setting up 25, but I'll mention that, or Helen and I will mention it towards the end. But there's a few things that I haven't yet mentioned, that I haven't spoken about, which I'll go through just with a few remaining slides. One of them is the landings. and the excursions. So you've seen some of my photographs that I've taken during the course of that most recent visit of mine, which was I was out there for 2 back-to-back trips. I was out there for a month. Every single day we will have at least 2 landings. So we'll do a morning landing and we'll do an afternoon landing. And those landings, what we'll do is we'll go from our lovely vessel Beluga, which you'll see in the background in this image here. So we'll go from Beluga, we will disembark Beluga, and we'll get into these skiffs or zodiacs, which is how you would know them from expedition cruising in the polar regions. So you get into the zodiacs. The landings on the Galapagos are either dry landings or wet landings. And even if it is a dry landing, it might become a wet landing if you don't concentrate on what the driver says or what the guide says. But it will be one or the other, either dry or wet, and it's probably about 50-50. This was at Gardner Bay, which is the first landing that we do on the second day. This is a wet landing. It's a lovely beach landing. You don't even need to have a pair of flip-flops with you. It's a lovely landing. It's a wet landing. This, on the other hand, is one of the dry landings. So there are other dry landings, of course. As I say, it's about 50-50, but this is a dry landing. You can see we're walking down some steps here, and the driver has got the Zodiac secure on one of the steps, and we'll just climb in. And getting on and off Beluga, there are always crew members to assist us. In this case, this lovely chap here, Jose, is the captain of Beluga, and the gentleman in the white shirt is one of his team members. So getting off and on and off the vessels is very easy. It's very safe. It's very, very well practiced. I haven't mentioned yet the fact that we'll be doing quite a lot of Zodiac cruising as well. So we might do a morning excursion and an afternoon excursion, and a morning landing, sorry, and an afternoon landing. And between and in and around that landing, we may well spend a half an hour or 40 minutes or whatever it might be, Zodiac cruising. Looking out for things like this. Well, this is bottlenose dolphin, of which there are many, and we may well see them. I hope we will. I've seen them on every trip that I've done. We might see turtles, we might see rays. We've lovely eagle rays and all sorts of different species of ray that we might see. The other thing that I haven't mentioned is Galapagos penguins. Galapagos penguins are the only penguin that you will see or may see north of, I almost said the Arctic Circle then, because you definitely won't see them north of the Arctic Circle. Anyway, north of the equator. I've been lucky enough to see them on every trip I've done. So with any luck, we'll see Galapagos penguins, because we certainly should do, and there are 2 or 3 places where we may well see them. Whale watching. So I haven't mentioned whale watching yet. I would say there are good opportunities to see whales rather than excellent opportunities to see whales. This isn't one of my photographs. This is a sperm whale off the coast of the Galapagos. This also isn't one of my photos. This is a brooder's whale off the coast of the Galapagos. And these are possibilities. To be honest, the whale watching possibilities improve a little bit later in the year. So if you were just going to the Galapagos to see whales, then maybe don't go in April, May, June time. But then it will be kind of unusual to be going to the Galapagos just to see whales. On the other hand, the next couple of shots are mine. And on the first of the 2 voyages that we did, Mark and I did in May of last year, we had a really exciting encounter with orcas. There was a group of 6 or 7, if I remember rightly. This, as you can see, was a male. So we had great orca viewing. And the whale watching tends to be, certainly the opportunity to see whales is always better off the coast of Isabela. So it's off the west coast, and that's because the water off that coast is much cooler. It's 2 or 3 degrees cooler than it is elsewhere in the Galapagos. But the whale watching opportunities, I'd say, are good. They're not excellent, but there's definitely chances. Other activities that I haven't mentioned during the course of this presentation thus far: kayaking. Right back at the beginning, I showed you the kayaks on top of Beluga. There are a couple of different opportunities we have to get in kayaks. One of them's at Darwin Bay, one of them's at Elizabeth Bay. I can't remember exactly where this is. I think this was near Post Office Bay. But many of the vessels, most of the vessels perhaps have kayaks, some even have stand-up paddleboards, but certainly Beluga that we're on board on these trips that I'm describing have kayaks, and the kayaks are great, and there are definitely opportunities to paddle. Obviously, I've been talking about landing and I've been talking about walking. Some of the landings, we are quite sedentary, really, but some of them there's some lovely walking opportunities. The walking can be really super. And one of the things, again, that I haven't yet mentioned, I've kind of alluded to, is snorkeling. So whether you're on Beluga or any of the other vessels, there are snorkeling opportunities every single day. So one of the activities that we will do every day without fail, if you want to, is snorkeling. With 1 or 2 exceptions, the snorkeling is easy. There is snorkeling gear on board Beluga, so you don't need to take your own, though you're very welcome to. There are wetsuits on board Beluga, so you don't need to take your own, but you may want to, and Helen and I will chat about that when we come to Q&A. It's lovely to get in the water and be with the animals in the water and the fish, and possibly see hammerhead sharks and white-tip reef sharks and all this from a snorkeling perspective. And it's a really big part of going to the Galapagos. Having an opportunity to swim with sea lions is really wonderful. It's a fantastic experience. So it's well worth considering that and thinking about if you're going, and I know that there's some of you on board this evening that are traveling with us in the course of the next year or two, think about taking a GoPro or some similar form of underwater camera. I need to also just mention photography. So something that I'm interested in, as I know a lot of you know, I don't claim to be a good photographer, but I am interested in photography. Photography is a big part of it, I think, for anyone that goes. But it's a big part of it, regardless of the type of kit that you've got. So to me, this kind of sums up, in many respects, the beauty of the Galapagos, in the sense that this is a chap that was on one of our trips. He's got an iPhone. He's actually closer than I am to this particular bird, this red-footed booby, that isn't even slightly bothered about him. And I know, because I've seen them, he got some fantastic photographs. This guy is photographing the gulls. Of course, again, you can see him just sat on the same bench as the gulls as they're preening. You don't need to have big, long lenses and all that kind of stuff in order to get some really super shots on these trips. I do need to mention that going on a vessel isn't necessarily for everybody, and we grew up, in inverted commas, as a company that tailor makes trips, and we can easily tailor make a trip for you in the Galapagos. You don't need to be on board a vessel. There are some lovely lodges now in the Galapagos archipelago, like this one I've illustrated here. There are other vessels that we use, some that are slightly larger than the 16-berth Beluga, some that are smaller, that accommodate 8 people. So you might want to consider those options. If you were staying in the lodges, I would have to say you'll have a wonderful experience, and your day trips, morning activities, afternoon activities, and so on would be restricted to as far as you can get, possibly stating the obvious, but as far as you can get from a lodge. So going on board a vessel is without doubt a big part of the Galapagos experience, because you can get to more places, you can get further away, you can see more stuff. But it would be wrong of me not to mention the fact that you can stay in lodges. So I mentioned snorkeling, and there's snorkeling every single day on our trips in the Galapagos, and it is absolutely fantastic. I love snorkeling. I love being in the water, and I've snorkeled in lots of lovely places around the world. And I snorkeled every day for 28 days in the Galapagos. There was there's one place where the snorkeling in the Galapagos is better than anywhere else, in my view, and that's Fernandina. One of the reasons for that is because Fernandina is where you're able to actually swim with the marine iguanas, and you're actually then able to see them feeding under the water. So when I was putting this presentation together yesterday evening, I thought it'd be quite nice just to show some video of that. I thought you probably wouldn't want to watch all of the video that I took when I was snorkeling. So I have condensed, well, it's about an hour and 20 minutes worth of GoPro footage, which I took, into 1 minute and 6 seconds, which I'll start in a second. And this, for me, really sums up the entire snorkeling experience in the Galapagos. This is the best hour and 20 minutes of snorkeling I've ever done anywhere in the world. So if that doesn't make you want to go snorkeling, then I don't know what will. I think it's just wonderful. I hope you were able to see some of that. I hope it came through. So this final slide really is just to show you the complexity of the voyages that we're doing. As you can see, we started in San Cristobal, we go to Espanola, Floriana, up to Santa Cruz, over to Sullivan Bay and Bartolome, up to Darwin Bay and Genovesa, back down again to Santa Cruz, up into the highlands and to Puerto Ayora, and then over to Sombrero Chino and to Rabida. And then we do this trip across to Isabela, up into the highlands. And then we go all the way around Isabela, Elizabeth Bay, Punta Marina, Urbina, bit of stuff in Fernandina, and then all the way around Santiago, blah, 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 back. And then we end up in North Seymour and board our plane in Baltra and fly back to Quito and home after having had the most wonderful experience anybody could possibly have. We have 2 trips next year, as is clearly indicated here. April the 18th with Helen and 16th of May with myself and Mark. Helen's trip in 2024 is now full, and my trip with Mark in 2024 is now full. So we are looking at 2025. We have the dates. We're just finalizing those dates. We've been doing work on that in the course of the past few days, and those specific dates will appear in an e-news or some other missive from us in the course of the next few days. But the April 25 dates are in our calendar, and we'll announce those to you as soon as we can. With that in mind, I would obviously like to say thank you for listening. Oh, look, there's Helen.
My very small head.
Yes, with your very small head. Yes, there we are. Now you're a bit taller now, and that's good. So I'd like to say thank you for listening, and of course, would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Yeah, answer any questions you may have about anything. Hit me with it.
We have quite a few. So first thing I'm going to do is pose a question to our lovely listeners to find out whether they would be interested in receiving a travel plan for my trip or for yours. So mine is the Galapagos wildlife trip. Yours is the exclusive with Mark Corwidine and you as well. So I'm just launching that poll as we speak and testing my and your multitasking skills, Miss Breen. So quite a few questions, unsurprisingly. Can I start with, why do you go in May, June? It's a year-round destination. I thought that was quite a good question.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It is absolutely a year-round destination. To some extent, it's a bit of a turning of the seasons. So the climate changes. So it's starting to get a bit cooler at the end of May and the beginning of June. There might be a bit more mist at the end of May and the beginning of June. We might see humpback whales migrating through at that time of year. So there's lots of might sees. The reality is that, well, we wouldn't go in January, February, March because the waved albatross aren't there, and that'd be a terrible shame not to see them because they're a biggie, they're a really big draw. That would be a terrible shame. There are quite a few things that are nesting at that time of year, and it's just a great time to go. I wouldn't go. Well, I would go at any time of year, to be completely honest with you. Personally, I would go any time of year. But really, the reason why we've organised the trips for May, June, is because it's a bit of a turning point in the year. There's unusual things that can appear, from the point of view of bird life, from the point of view of cetaceans and things like that. And I think that's quite good. So that's the real reason why we do it then. August, September, it's much colder and the seas are really quite choppy, and that can be a bit uncomfortable. So we'd rather avoid that, as you can imagine.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. We've had quite a few questions about meals on board, particularly for vegetarians and vegans.
Yep. No issues at all. So on the trip that we did, well, it doesn't really matter which one. Anyway, the second of the two trips I did last year, there were people that ate everything. There was a pescatarian, there was a vegan, there was a vegetarian, and everybody was catered for. Would I say it's the best food you'll have on any trip that you're going to do with us? No, I wouldn't. But it's jolly good. And the facilities that they have on these vessels, and Beluga in this particular case, that they don't have a big kitchen or anything like that, and the food that they prepare is absolutely super. It's really super. Lovely. Okay. And what about macro photo opportunities? Plenty. So I mean, I'm not a macro photographer, as was self-evident, I suspect. One of the things about being in the Galapagos is that it's a very well-controlled national park environment. And you have to be with a guide at all times. So you can't just, unless the guide tells you you can't just sit on the beach on your own and do your own thing for the duration of the excursion, unless you're in a particular place where that is allowed. So you have to kind of keep moving with the guide. But that's fine. because the object of the exercise is to look at things and is to photograph things, and there would certainly be macro photography opportunities and plenty of them.
Lovely, thank you. You're sticking with the photographic theme. Did you use a flash for your barn owl picture?
Nope, didn't use
Is
flash.
flash
Not allowed to
permitted?
use flash.
No,
Pardon?
good. Okay.
Yeah, not allowed to use flash. I used very high ISO. I can't remember exactly what it was now, but I would be able to find out. Used very high ISO, and then I used denoise software to get rid of the noise on the image.
Lovely. And can you remind us of the group size? How many does Beluga accommodate?
16, maximum 16. So the way that the vessels work in the Galapagos, there are lots of 8 berth vessels, bathtubs perhaps, because they're small. There are 16 berth, then there are 32s, and then they go up into bigger numbers. None of the vessels are huge, but 16 is just such a lovely number. When you've got a guide and a couple of people from Wildlife Worldwide and a group of 14 or 15, whatever it might be, it's really super. And it's really nice because you all eat together for dinner in the evenings. On Beluga, you can't actually all sit around one table, unfortunately. There's 2 tables, but kind of take it in turns. Everyone kind of moves around. It's lovely. And there's plenty of space up on the sun deck, which is above the dining area. So we spend quite a lot of time up on the sun deck, which is really super, and there's space for everybody. It's a nice place to have a beer or a Coke or a gin and tonic in the evening, or whatever it might be. That's lovely. Or just sitting up there after dark. Actually, as I did on a number of occasions, and see one or 2 particular places and see owls hunting, and also, of course, there's no light pollution. So, as will be the case for at least 50% of the journey, if not more, I'm sure there'll be no cloud cover. So the night sky is just blindingly good. It's just brilliant. So wow. Yeah, there's plenty of space. So group of 16 on board is fabulous. So that I should just be absolutely accurate. That's 16 plus the naturalist guide plus the crew.
Perfect. And you mentioned that you can, the opportunities to snorkel are pretty much daily. But if people don't want to get in the water daily,
no problem.
What do they do instead? Stay on board, looking for whales, looking for marine life. Yeah.
But so what would happen? There would be, so for example, first thing in the morning, you would go out and you would do a morning excursion, land-based excursion. Let's say there would be let's say there's a wet landing on wherever, I don't know, Gardner Bay or something. There'll be a wet landing, and then you come back. You'll have it's really super. Every time you get back on board, the guys in the kitchen will have done something. So there'll be lovely fruit, a lovely gigantic platter of fruit that'll be there, or I don't know, something or other. They will have done some snack.
Plasticated trousers are the norm, aren't they, on these?
Yes, exactly. Yes, it's very important. Yes, very important. Make sure you go on a strict diet before you get on board.
Yeah.
And so you might be given then half an hour, 45 minutes or whatever to then prepare to go snorkeling. You've then got 2 choices, 3, I suppose. Either if you don't want to go snorkeling, you can stay on board, and some people do like to stay on board and watch the world go by from being on board, or you can go snorkeling, or you can go out on the Zodiacs that are doing the snorkeling and not snorkel. You can watch the snorkelers snorkeling.
Or kayak, I guess, as well. Pardon? Or kayak potentially.
No, if you're snorkeling, the snorkeling is pretty strictly controlled. So if you're snorkeling, there'll be the 2 Zodiacs, with at least 2, if not 3 pairs of eyes on the snorkelers. So that is a very distinct activity, and kayaking is also a distinct activity.
Okay.
Yeah, so eyes on the snorkelers when they're in the water for safety purposes, and likewise with the kayaking for the same reason. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then another vessel question: are the cabins en suite?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are en suite. Yeah, sorry, I had to do I had to pause for thought, having just come off Searcher. Yes, they're all en suite. Yeah. Again, it accommodates 16 people. It's not a massive, we're not talking like a massive ship with a huge bathroom, but they're en suite. They're brilliant. They've got everything you need. They're fantastic.
Brilliant. Right. That's your lot.
Is
That's
that
all
it?
the questions. Yes.
Okay,
Can you
stand
take
by.
forward to the final slide, please?
Yes. Before we go to the final slide, I am just going to say one other thing, Helen, about the snorkeling. So, so the water temperature is lovely for snorkeling, and they provide wetsuits. What I did, after having been a couple of times, I decided to take my own wetsuit. That was slightly thicker, and the wetsuits that they provide are short arms and short legs. And I bought for myself relatively cheaply, it was 100 quid or something, 125 quid from Decathlon, a thicker wetsuit, and it was a very good decision. But yeah, anyway, that's my last slide.
Brilliant. Wow. Well, crikey, roll on the 10th of October and roll on the 18th of April.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And May for you.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
Oh, no, seriously, thank you, Chris. I know that,
Pleasure.
yeah, that really was. I got even a little bit slightly choked up when I saw that footage of the marine iguana swimming.
Oh, they're amazing.
Oh, just sublime. It is fantastic when you've got a penguin, you know, literally just zooming past you in the water, and then you turn around and there's a sea lion, and then you put your head up and you're looking on rocks with, you know, iguanas and sea lions. It's just, it's an insane, fabulous, brilliant destination. So
it is amazing.
Yeah.
It's properly amazing. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's just the most wonderful thing. And that particular snorkeling event, in inverted commas, like I snorkeled for 28 days consecutively. That one I will remember till the day I drop.
Wow.
It's the most fantastic snorkeling experience. There were certain points where I had to breathe in, try and hold my chest and my tummy in order not to bump into turtles.
Wow, you're just showing off now. Marvelous, truly marvelous. Well, listen, thank you very much again. And for those of you that, there's quite a few people who are listening who are joining us next year, so we can't wait to share this amazing destination with you. And for those of you that are interested in booking in the future, we are working as a priority on our 2025 departure date. And we do have a special offer of £100 per person. At the risk of sounding like Tesco's, every little helps. So you can get in touch with us via email. You can contact us on the phone, obviously, through our website. And if you're keen to spend another evening in your armchair traveling around the world, then our next Discovery evenings will be the 9th of March, which is Why Choose, a photo workshop with Nick Garbett and Alex Hyde, fantastic combination of pro photographers. And then next week, we have the one and only Daniel Free. He's going to be talking about his adventures in the Falklands and in South Georgia when he went out there at the end of last year, his first polar experience. And I, quite frankly, I'm not sure how he's going to top it. So possibly with our Festival of Wildlife in 2025. But yeah, and now at the sound of sounding like a cartoon, that's all, folks. So thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.
See you all. Thank you for coming.
Goodbye from him and goodbye from me.